Welcome to Truest Blood, the official True Blood podcast.
I'm Kristin Bauer.
And I'm Deborah Ann Wool.
And you've been invited in.
I wanna do bad things with you. On Truest Blood.
Welcome back to Truest Blood, where we sink our fangs into the series bite by bite.
This week, Angela Robinson stops by to discuss her experience writing for the show. As a later addition to the show, I think she must just have such a unique perspective on how this writer's room worked, and it is no easy feat jumping into that Shark Tank.
Yeah, that's definitely only the best survive. That's initiation.
It'll really test you.
Yes, and she is undoubtedly one of the best. So good talking to her.
Her energy coming on the set and then coming on the podcast. I always love talking to her. She's such a artistic person, but she wears it so easily and casually, right? Like there's no showing off or anything, but then she'll say these things and you're like, oh my God.
I know.
That is so insightful.
It is so insightful. Yeah, she's continually surprising because she's kind of understated.
Yes.
And then just hits the ball out of the park.
That's right. But it puts you off your guard in such a nice way.
Mm-hmm.
But first, let's have a quick bite. The evolution of a stunt.
The evolution of stunt performance in film predates film itself. As the fledgling industry was finding its footing, the first stunt performers were found in the rodeo shows and vaudeville circuits and daredevil performers. When a production needed someone to jump off a train, they would simply find someone willing to jump off a train.
So yes, early stunting found its home mostly in slapstick comedy with, performers like Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton, all performing their own stunts, often requiring extraordinary precision and gusto to pull off. But as stunts got more impressive, they also required more safety measures. So there's that famous scene in the ironically titled Safety Last film where the lead character dangles from a clock face. You've probably seen it.
Yep.
So not only was that the first time they used stunt doubles, but also padding, safety harnesses, and crash mats.
We have Helen Gibson, the first stunt woman, a vaudevillian, trick writer, and rodeo performer. She did 119 episodes of The Hazards of Helen, the longest serial in history. The first 49 starred Helen Holmes, for whom Gibson doubled. But when Holmes left to form her own company, Gibson officially took on the role for the remaining episodes.
So the 1930s and 40s brought back the westerns and swashbucklers, folks like John Wayne and Errol Flynn. And it was Wayne who championed his stunt double, Yakima Canutt, to help create the memorable action sequences in John Ford's Stagecoach, innovating camera angles and equipment to make the action more realistic. And it was also during this time that a group of stuntmen calling themselves the Cousins campaigned for higher pay, insurance, and to discontinue the use of bump men, who were really just extras that agreed to put their lives in danger.
Oh my God.
Wild.
It's crazy. Stunt teams begin to emphasize preparation and choreography in their work, continuing to develop the techniques of Canutt and innovating their gear to create more and more impressive feats.
In 1961, the Stuntmen's Association of Motion Pictures is officially founded. This continues to give stunt coordinators more power to hire and direct sequences to their level of safety and training. In 1967, in a response to wigging, which is where male performers were wearing wigs to stunt for female characters, and paint downs when white performers in makeup would double other ethnicities, the Stunt Women's and Black Stunt Men's Associations are formed, and the offensive practices fall away and open the job opportunities to a wider field.
The 1960s brings in the car chase and James Bond.
Yes.
And technology starts to become an asset. The invention and utilizing of air rams, airbags, decelerators, gunshot squibs all allow for greater safety and greater entertainment. The 1970s sees the rise of martial arts movies with skilled performers like Bruce Lee and the amazing Jackie Chan. We see disaster epics like The Poseidon Adventure and The Towering Inferno.
But until this decade, stunt performing had largely been kept in the dark from the public. Squeamish actors, directors, and studios wanting credit for all that was seen on screen. Finally, in 1975, The Master Gunfighter, we finally see stunt performers and coordinators receive credit for their work. Now they become celebrities in their own right.
The 1980s is all about character and testosterone. John McClane, Rambo, and The Terminator were the stars as much as Willis, Stallone, and Schwarzenegger. And their characterizations were all heavily influenced by their stunt teams. By the 1990s and 2000s, CGI and motion capture is integrating computer technology into traditional stunt techniques. We see Jurassic Park, Titanic, and The Matrix, Lord of the Rings, and Planet of the Apes. Now stunt performers can do even grander sequences in safer green screen conditions and deliver us even more thrills.
Now, even with this well-deserved recognition and collaboration, hard fought for over a century of cinema, there is still no award for stunt coordination or performance at most major industry ceremonies, including the Academy Awards.
Wow.
Now, the Emmys, the SAG Awards, and the Canadian Screen Awards are the exception.
Now, True Blood was not a movie, but still the tireless contribution of our stunt team cannot be understated and deserves the highest of accolades. So we will do our best here by sharing the names of a few of the people that made the stunts on True Blood thrilling and, most importantly, safe.
Heidi Pascoe, who doubled Sookie and Ginger for 48 episodes. Hiro Koda, who coordinated for 32 episodes. Mark Wagner doubled Bill and Jesus for 31 episodes. Mike Massa coordinated for 19. Ben Scott coordinated for 17. We have Dan Flanagan, Janelle Kerfman, Henry Kingi Jr., Jess Harbeck, Spencer Sano, Timothy Ulick, Bonsai Vitale, Crystal Michelle, Jeff Danoff, Kevin Durr, and so many others.
I mean, the list could go on and on. They are professionals, they are artists, and they are awesome. And it's so sweet, Deb. Thank you for acknowledging these people. And thank you to them for making the show so great.
And I also want to thank the British Action Academy. They have an incredible website, which is where I learned most of this information. So if you want to be a stunt performer or you want to learn more about it, I really recommend that you head over there and read up.
Angela Robinson is a producer, writer, and director who was born on Valentine's Day, V-Day, in Chicago. She majored in theater at Brown University and completed an MFA at NYU. She first produced Taxi Cab Confessions, then moved on to write, produce, and direct the Emmy-nominated GLAAD and Satellite-winning TV show, The L Word, the HBO TV show Hung, and How to Get Away with Murder.
She has created so much content. Just one I'll mention is in 2007, she created this great online series called Girl Trash. In 2014, she then wrote and produced a musical feature film and prequel to the Girl Trash series called Girl Trash All Night Long, which was directed by her wife.
Yes, and then she's the writer and director of one of my favorite movies, Debs. So great. Go see it.
So great.
In 2021, Angela Robinson signed a deal to create scripted television for Warner Brothers, including our very own Max. She is currently developing a DC Comics character known as Madame Xanadu, who is a clairvoyant that uses tarot cards to tell the future and is immortal due to her deal with death.
Sounds a little like True Blood. She is a brilliant writer, an accomplished and also a welcoming producer. Yes. She's a fabulous director and also just a really lovely human being. And we just feel really fortunate that she was willing to come and talk to us about all things True Blood.
Hello, Angela. Welcome to Truest Blood. We're so excited to have you.
It's so good to see you. Can you believe it?
I can't believe it. I
know.
can't believe it at all. I'm a little gobsmacked to see you too.
Well, we're so thrilled to have you. I love having writers on because I feel like so many of those stories don't get told with as much sort of publicity as usual. So I'm thrilled to have you. Especially too, I think you're one of the first writers who came in later in the series. So first of all, I would love to hear, how did you get the job and what was that like, kind of coming into an established arena?
That was so cool, actually. I mean, maybe I could admit the true story. The true story is that I was a writer, a director on Hung, the HBO show. And as that show was kind of drawing to a close, I went in and I had a meeting with, I think, then President Sue Nagle at HBO. And we were talking, and also was friendly with Casey Bloys, who was awesome there. And they were like, we want you to keep working with HBO. Like, what would you want to do? And I said, I want to work on True Blood.
Oh my gosh.
And
That's wild.
this is crazy, but I'd only watched the pilot of True Blood, and now it was like headed into season 5. Do you know what I mean? Like I said, but I was like, I want to work on this show. And they were like, great, they're looking, we think you'd be awesome. You're like a genre nerd.
Yeah.
And like, you know, David Levine there was like, we need that type of stuff. And one of our writers is leaving. And so we're looking for somebody to like fill this space. And so they said, do you want to meet with Alan Ball tomorrow, who I like revered, do you know what I mean, since forever.
Yes.
And I was like, oh shit, I haven't actually like asked, like, watch the show, and they wanted to meet with me tomorrow. And I lied, and I said I had to go out of town and that I'd meet him in a week. And then I binged the series like over and over, like just massively.
Oh my gosh.
And then I went in to meet Alan at the cute bungalow, and he was so lovely.
Yeah.
And what's amazing is he didn't ask me a single question about True Blood.
I was wondering.
He just didn't ask me anything. It was just like how he asked me about myself. He asked me about how he was. He was so lovely and wonderful. And then he was like, okay, you get the job. And I was like,
Oh my God.
Yeah. But by then I was like so hooked. So yeah.
So then how long between that meeting were you then in a writer's room getting started?
That was one of the most insane and best experiences of my writing career, I have to say, because I came in season 5, and it was like 3 days later or something.
Yeah.
I mean, it was really kind of a whirlwind, like, and then you're plopping in.
Wow.
And the thing about the True Blood writer's room is it was different from any other writer's room I've ever been in, is that Alan was such an incredible showrunner that he just knew by the time it reached season 5, it was all EPs basically, or co-EPs. Like it was all high level writers by the time. And the way he ran the room was most writers' rooms go from like 10 to 6 or longer. There's a lot of time kind of wasted with, hi, how do you do? And like, what'd you do last weekend? And something like, but when you came into the True Blood writer's room, Alan worked from 10 to 2. There was like, you didn't stop for lunch. If you went to the bathroom and like, you just sat down at 10, you'd say hi for about 30 seconds, and then you just start pitching story. So I liken it to being like double dutch, you know, like when you're jumping rope.
Yeah.
Like there's just like, the thing is when you jump into like double dutch, you just don't want to fuck up the rope. You know, because like everybody, like they're just going with the 2 ropes, and you just have to jump in and like spin around and do your jazz hands and then jump out without messing up the rope. But if you jump in and you do some lousy pitch, then everybody gets super mad with you. So they have to stop, and they have to untangle the rope, and then they have to you have to step out, and they have to get it going again. And so I was like, this is like the most intense thing of double dutch. And also it was one of these rooms where everybody was a high level writer operating a thing. They were just like, would just pitch. He'd be like, yes, that idea, no, that idea. You'd keep going, and you just had to keep up. And also you'd get canned if you weren't just making it great. Like most times, you just sit down and you order lunch. And you just like for a long time. But this was really like, if you didn't, it was really nice. Do you know what I mean? It was just like either you're going to cut it or you're not going to cut it. So I had this kind of incredible experience where I just was like, figure out when I was going to jump into the rope, jump into the double, like when I was going to pitch. And I just kind of stayed silent, just listening for a couple of days because I just didn't want to blow it. And then I remember once it was something about Christian guy who was
Steve Newland,
Steve Newland and Russell.
Yes.
And then there was the Janina's puppy or something.
Yep. Yes.
Her daughter, right? Do you know what I mean? And then we were going through something, and the room was kind of arguing over whether or not Janina's character's daughter should get kidnapped. And then they were all like, no, they always get kidnapped. Why would they get kidnapped? They're always kidnapped. They're always taken hostage. So, and I was like, then my first pitch was Steve Newland, Russell should kidnap Janina's daughter. And everybody was like about to pounce on me. And I was like, as a pet for Steve. And like, there was this like pause.
Right.
I was like, not the little girl, the baby werewolf girl.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Like when it turns into the pet, the little wolf.
Right.
And the kid is just a side note.
Right.
Totally.
Right.
And there was this gap, and everybody went, great. And then they just started pitching, and I was like, phew. So that was
out of the rope.
That was my first. And I like jumped in the rope, and I got out of the rope, and the rope kept going, and I was like, okay. And then I was like, in. Do you know what I mean? Like it was kind of what I call a tough room because nobody was, about not in the best possible way. They were just like, we're just making television. Like let's not, like we're not going to just be nice to you. You don't get an A for effort.
And did you have that idea for a couple of days, or was that like an on the fly?
No, I had it like It was on the fly, but you didn't want to pitch something that had been pitched a bunch. Like I was just waiting and kind of getting up to speed to be like, what kind of pitches work in this world? Where has it been? And I did a ton of prep where I watched the show, but I actually read every single episode of True Blood before. And I diagrammed how Alan wrote them. Like I was really like the syntax, where he put the punctuation, how the dialect. Like I was totally obsessed with being able to kind of execute right away on a really high level. And then my first script was Boot and Rally Alley, because I just basically wanted to be able to, it's like a Top Gun or something. You're like flying with the like aces, basically. So you just wanted to come in and go. And one of the best compliments I've ever received in my career is I went away to write my first episode, which was season 5, Boot and Rally Alley.
Yeah, 4 or 5,
And we'd gotten the break and we worked on the thing, and I left to write it, and I just slaved over that script. And then the process was that you sent in your script to all the writers and Alan, and the writers would give you notes plus Alan, but you walk in and you're getting notes collectively from Alan and the writers collectively. So you sent it out, and then like 3 days later, you're going to like come into the room and everybody's read it. You're kind of there to like take your medicine. And I've seen this happen to like a bunch of other writers. And like the writers were harsh. You know what I mean? They were just like, no, this, just that. I mean, it wasn't really. And I walked into the room, and then everybody, the writer's room, like stood up and started clapping for me. And they gave me like a writer's standing ovation.
You're kidding.
No, I was like so touched. Like I nearly cried. I was like, they were like, this is a fucking phenomenal first draft.
Oh
And
my
they
God.
he had like 3 notes. And so like all that hard work paid off. And it was really like, I was like, okay, like, now I'm in this thing with everybody. And so it was pretty cool.
Wow.
Wow, that's so stressful.
So stressful. And you've done all of this work examining like the structure and how it goes together. What about content? I mean, was there a 400-page Bible you had to read or, required vampire reading? I mean, how were you asked to prepare?
No, actually.
Okay.
I mean, what was interesting was, and then nobody asked me to do any of this.
Okay, right.
Even like watch the script. And they told me like off the bat, don't read the books.
Interesting.
Because it got so far. I know, like they were just like, don't bother reading
Don't
the
worry about
books. Just watch the show. And nobody actually, I mean, I say this to like young writers, like I took it upon myself to try to kind of do all of that prep in order to be able to just drop into the show and know, because every show has its language and its world and its style and like the content. So they explain, you'd get in there and they'd be like, no, this is how V works, or this is how something, or you can't because, I mean, there's hilarious discussions I wish were about, like I've spent more hours than I like to imagine on like the rules of vampires, like the rules of the the silver chains and cans, like how weak is a vampire, what the thing, like how much sunlight, what like. So you get in these very intense, esoteric, arguments about totally fantastical realms. But I didn't. But it just had the rules of the show. And some were changeable. Like some people disagreed on what the core rules were, but there's basically the rules, and you just try to continue to reinvent engaging story around, which becomes harder and harder the more into, season after season to kind of come up with. So a lot of what we were working with in season 5 on was how to like dig into pockets that like how to grow the story, but without sacrificing or leaving the like why people tune in, like the core human stories of the people in Von Top.
Yeah, that's so challenging. I mean, Deb writes the synopsis for each season that we're doing the podcast for, and it's getting longer and longer.
It's the hardest thing ever.
I mean, you really came into a lot of characters and storylines, and we are kind of wondering, how do you juggle that screen time? Is it by feel? What to follow and how much time to spend on each one. And
by the time I got there, Alan had an entire workflow, basically, of how to break the episodes, it was is actually, I think, the most efficient and well-run writer's rooms I'd ever been in. You would go in and you'd start with like 2 or 3 weeks where you planned out the major arcs of each character throughout the season. Like, what is the question? What are we going to be dealing with this season? What's the question of the season? Like the big question. And then kind of overall arcs for each of the characters and who they're going to be butting heads with, who they're going to be engaged with, like love affairs, big conflict, kind of like what the conflict of the season is going to be. So you arc that out. You take like 2 to 3 weeks where you're just sitting in the room figuring that out. And then you'd be like, okay, episode 501, which means season 5, episode 1. And you'd methodically go through each character. Do you know what I mean? You'd always start with Sookie and then to Bill, Eric, and then you'd go through everybody's storyline. So you'd block through. So first it'd be, this is Sookie's arc, and this is how much she does. So you have the overall season arc. So you're basically divided into eighths, if it's 8 episodes or 12, if it's 12 episodes. But then within that, you're like, okay, so Sookie's going from here to here in this episode. In episode 1, but then we have to make a
12
story
steps
of
to
the
get there.
episode.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, it has to take 12 steps, but within the episode, it has to tell a full and complete, compelling story.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? So everybody's on their major arc, but within the episode, what is each character's arc? And we really like went through every character. And then you'd be like, no, do you know what I mean? They don't have enough scenes. They don't have enough. Like, it was always kind of like striking a balance where I'd say there's usually like 3 to 5 storylines going on at a given time. And often you'd get this crazy cliffhanger, like at the end of the previous season with no idea how to answer it. Do you know what I mean? Like, so it was kind of like they'd write you into a corner and then, you know, not knowing if you were coming back, and then you come back and you'd be like, oh shit, like Tara, like
Tara's a vampire.
No.
The hell do we do now?
But we really just, you start like, you don't know, different writers come, like different people come back for the next season. So you're basically like left with what they, like an improv game or something, like here's what you're left with, and you have to that there's an emotional arc that's going to happen. Do you know what I mean? Some stuff is built in, some stuff like, how is Sookie going to react to that? How is, do you know what I mean? Like Tara, like, so you kind of start with this, and that some episodes will be, this is the episode we emotionally explore this part. This is the episode where, so you kind of have these not only plot things, but character episodes. Do you know what I mean? Where this is going to really kind of focus while keeping the narrative drive of just the story going. Like, so it's really a balance. It's like all sorts of spinning plates that you're trying to kind of keep, and then you're in a baton with the other writers. So you're
and
I'm
playing
spinning
double
all
dutch.
these plates, and then I toss them to you, and then you pick up all the plates. It's like those jugglers, you know, and then you toss them to the next person.
And now do it while jumping rope.
Yeah.
Well, so to that end, though, I'm curious for one more spinning plate in the air, right? Like, you're an artist, you're a writer, you have your own style, your own point of view, things that you want to talk about with your work. How does that layer then get filtered in? Because certainly as an actor, I can feel when I read it, writers have different, even though you're sort of just fulfilling a brief in some way, I can feel style and interpretation in there. And we have certain writers that we personally, felt more affinity to. So how does that layer come in?
That's the whole magic of it. That's what, what's so fun is that you get like 6 totally different writers in a room. I always think it's kind of like magic because it is the weird combination of totally different people kind of come with 100 and the very distinct mindsets and styles and what they want to say and what they're doing with your work. And I always feel like what's fun about TV is you get to collaborate in that way. So you're making something that's kind of bigger than all of you. You kind of, I think when you're writing something, you give of your heart. You literally, like, you can't write something unless it kind of comes through your heart and your mind. And you have to figure out within the story I'm telling, what do I want to say with it? And it will kind of come through. Do you know what I mean? Like, so I had a specific point of view. And what was really cool about Alan and the whole True Blood room is that it gave each writer the space to do that. Do you know what I mean? Like, some shows are much more kind of like locked in, but it was like you could, what it's like playing a piece of music. Do you know what I mean? Like every pianist can play a piece of music differently, but you're able to add your stuff. So like, I remember I always, throughout my work, I kind of do, like, being queer is really important to me. And I'd always kind of like try to find some angle where I could, if it was appropriate, put that into the storytelling. And I was attracted to the show. One of the reasons was because I felt like there was this vampire queer like ideology kind of metaphor happening that you could see of coming out of the coffin and like 100%. You know what I mean, like how do you relate to people who don't understand you or don't think you should exist, or do you, and like one of my favorite scenes actually that I wrote in the entire show, Deborah, was the one with you and Jessica and Tara.
Yeah.
And I call
So-
it the it gets better scene.
Yeah.
And I was
Yeah.
like, this is within my head. I was like, it gets better. So there was this, do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
there was this thing and like whatever, Chris Circles that like life gets better. And
Yeah.
what was so beautiful is usually a scene has to be 2 minutes tops. But I wrote this like 5-page dialogue scene.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Just
Yeah.
between Jessica and Tara, where Jessica basically gives an "it gets better"
Yeah.
speech
Yeah.
to Tara and like makes her feel better after she became a vampire. And that was one of my favorite things to write and shoot. Like it was just beautiful. But I was like, this is really like me.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like it wouldn't have been like probably been an Alex Wu's episode or
Right,
Bucky's
right,
episode or something.
right.
Do you know what I mean? But I was like, in my episode, I get to do this.
Yeah.
And it was awesome.
Well, so I'm so glad you brought that up because part of why you are one of my favorite writers from the show is that, you know, and I loved the majority of what I got to do in the show, but so much of my storyline revolved around men, you know, a father figure, boyfriends, lovers, that kind of thing. And the bringing Jessica and Tara together, this idea that like Jessica didn't have friends. She didn't have a woman in her life. I mean, there's Sookie, but she, you know, we never really had that connection. And so when you started to introduce that relationship and this idea that like finally in Jessica's life there was going to be another young vampire and she was a girl and, you know, I was going to get to have conversations with another woman on this show, you know? and a fight with her too, right? Like a all-out brawl.
Oh, yeah.
Like it was both
Right.
of your episodes for me specifically was about like female camaraderie and friendship and vampire friendship and all of that together. And so I know I always really appreciated it on that level when you came in. I was like, oh, this new writer is giving me this opportunity to explore something new. So I thank you.
No, totally. And that was part of I mean, you don't actually think about it. You just kind
Of course, yeah.
get hired. No, I mean, I do. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I really like loved, you know, and responded actually to all of the female characters on this show. But it was one of my priorities just as a filmmaker and a writer to really try and, for sure, I know like with Sookie, with something is that I consider it's your job and that's why you're hired. And I've spent like a zillion times in the writer's room and often I've been the only woman or the only Black person or the only queer person or gender. Like, and so then it's not that you're like there to represent, but it's just my worldview
Yeah.
is to actually pay more attention than some. I think I do, but like it's just kind of what I am drawn to writing. I'm drawn to writing female characters, and that I will like look at something, and then in the room you're like, oh, okay, no, I'm really gonna like push for this because like why does she think that or why isn't that? And you have to kind of. You're like fighting for the characters in a way. You're kind of in these arguments and there's the like Uber machine of the show, but within it, you're like really like being like, okay, but would they react like this? And is that true, emotionally true? Or we've explored that piece of it, but like, let's explore like this piece and this aspect of this character and to kind of so I feel like a lot of times you're also an advocate in the room to make sure that the full breadth of stories are getting told because there's sometimes just the tyranny of the plot and you like kind of,
Right.
and you're actually True Blood was such a great thing because it was about all this stuff, but what made the show great was the opportunity to stop and explore a tributary of the character's life that wouldn't, you know, get explored. But you have to make sure you stop and do that. Do you know what I mean? Like I was like, this could only happen on True Blood was, I mean,
Only
many
one
things
of
could
those
only
moments?
happen. I was calling it, yes, a fever dream earlier. The whole thing was a fever dream.
Yes, fever dream.
But there was this moment where the story, I don't remember what episode, but it was Jason Stackhouse runs into a teacher he had,
Mm-hmm.
I think, in high school.
Yeah.
And then it's revealed that he had an affair with his teacher, and
Yes.
that really,
Yes.
and he runs into her in the grocery store, and that really like
Mm-hmm.
causes him this head trip, and like he
Yeah.
kind of got, and I was just like, this show's so awesome because in the middle of like vampire authorities and things and people getting staked and vampire wars, that we could stop and explore like Jason's relationship to his sexuality with this like older woman who
Yeah.
had sex with him at a formative time, and how that, and it's just this whole different unlock that you
Yeah.
could kind of just stop and do, and then keep going with the like, you know, and then 12 vampires get killed.
But that's the
Yeah.
But you
fascinating
stopped to do
balance of the
it, you
show.
know,
Yes.
and like, and you,
Yes.
and that's what's fascinating to put it
Yeah.
together. Like, I remember thinking a lot about, Kristen, the, Tara's arc and your arc, and Gina, like as a maker, and Gina, like that, I loved and like was
Me too.
fascinated with. And I was like, no, we have to give these stories time because it's different. Do
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And like, what happens when you have a female maker with a female
Yeah.
vampire? Do you know what I mean? Like, what happens when you're introduced? What happens with Sookie? What happens to all of these things? And to kind of give agency. And a lot of time, female characters in all TV shows, even if they're female led, they are responding to men. Do you know what I mean? Like they're reacting. Do you know what I mean? Like their
Yes.
job is to react to and not have their own independent protagonism and like driving their own independent story, that you could just watch their story and it be compelling enough and have enough pieces that they could have protagonism also. Do you know what I mean? And so,
Yeah.
and I think that was cool about, by the time you got to season 5, you could really, all the characters had kind of earned their own protagonism in a way that you could be like, okay, do you know what I mean? Like, now we understand so much about this character. Let's think of them as if they're the protagonist. And then you kind of flip POVs. But everybody was just kind of like, now you had all these characters just boom, 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 kind of going at each other. It was compelling, and like, I mean, many places to spin, but it was exciting.
Yeah, season 5 really took off in that direction, didn't it, for a lot of the females? And I assume the other characters too, but thinking of it through that lens is because Pam really, she was even released. She became a maker. She had her first on-screen kiss, I think. I mean, she kissed Eric once, but it wasn't anything like the Tara kiss. You know, and Jessica's on her own because Bill is, you know, on his own thing.
Yep.
And yeah, in the layers that we got to over the 7 seasons was so unbelievable. I don't know. That's such a rare thing for an actor to get. I mean, you have to get a run that long. But even so, the contradictions that we got written were so fantastic. I mean, I spent a year trying to kill Tara. Then I made her. Then she became my lover, you know? So delicious.
Right, totally.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, that's what's fun, where you go, and also maddening, I'm sure, as an actor.
No, it was never maddening on this show.
No, you love it. Yeah.
That you would go really far in one direction, and then the thing would be like, oh, okay, well then what's next? Like, let's switch it up. Like, how do we like take somebody from like the two characters who hate each other the most, and then let's tell the story of like fall for each other. Do you, like, and that's
Stephen Russell.
But that's great. That's where you come in and the like, when you're like, what are we doing? Do you know what I mean with Pam? What are we doing with Jessica? Like, what is the most fun situation? What can like stuff can we dredge up and build on with what we know and like throw it against
Right.
all of them each other, like, you know, blood goo.
So then I'm curious because, again, one of the few writers on our staff who also then pivoted to directing. Now, you had directed before. This was part of your, you know, your oeuvre as of this point. But what is that like then,
writing and now then being on set, producing and directing, and this is in the, the finale season, which I'm sure carries a specific kind of weight. So yeah, talk about that a little.
Oh, that was incredibly fun. I very much love directing my own writing. Do you know what I mean? Like it's kind of a different experience and you bring different things and they're totally different jobs in my mind to directing something you've written and then directing something somebody else has written.
Sure.
Okay.
And they're both super fun, engaging jobs, but the core mind-blowing pleasure of directing something that you've written for me is that you really get to imagine it and then make it come to life. So it's a real high because it's just out of your brain.
Yeah.
And then you write these words. But as a writer, and I think this is many writers are frustrated because you don't actually get the opportunity. You have to hand it over.
Right.
So at some point, I think very few people actually get the opportunity to imagine it out of their heads, write it down, and then get to direct it so that it never matches what you imagined, but I think it's the clearest approximation of being able to be like, I thought something, I made it happen, now people are watching it on TV or in the movies, and it's super cool because it's kind of the closest you get to putting something in your head where other people can see it. Quite a clearest view. And so, anyways, but I love the episode I directed, and it was very gratifying because I got to have that experience on the show. And not in a kind of backseat directing way that some writers do, but just in a there's no gap or there's no handoff of meaning or structure. You could just kind of just go straight to the source and do it. So that was really fun. Also, I'm such an old pro that we totally made our days with time to spare.
Oh my God.
It was what? They're like, wait, we're used
should
to
have been
going,
doing this all along.
16 hours over. No, totally. Bucky was like, why did we wait to have you do this? You're good and fast.
Yeah.
I literally remember there was somebody on the crew, and I was like, okay, we're done with that scene. And there was literally a gasp of surprise. There was kind of this, people started rolling carts away and they were like, really? And I was like, yeah, we got it. And they were like, I don't know. They were like, oh my God, I can see my family. I could I could go to dinner. I don't know what. It was just kind of this
people
funny...
didn't know what to do. They just sat in their cars in the parking lot I can't go home at this hour.
But
what do I do now?
But you're right. There's a streamlining because, so much of creating any kind of form of art that's collaborative is having to, get across your idea to someone else who then interprets it and then has to get across that idea to someone else who then interprets it. And, when you remove one of those points of resistance, it must just clear minutes, if not hours.
No, it's really just just hours and hours. And I find especially in television because the writers are, ostensibly in charge of the vision of the show. Do you mean they're show running the shows, and especially on True Blood, you're producing your episodes in a very kind of direct way, and the directors are incredible. But I also understand the relationship between TV writing and TV directing, which is different than feature writing and feature directing, and it's a heavy lift to be a writer where there is the episode and what's happening, and the director is dealing with that episode, but you're dealing with the overall arcs of all the characters. So there might be a scene that's a throwaway scene in episode 2, but that's the setup for a giant scene that's going to happen in episode 8.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? So the interplay between that the writers are always having to kind of do double duty to explain and communicate all the story previously and all the story to come
Mm-hmm.
to the director who's just coming in for, like a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, so, but you're right. There's a lot of friction in trying to communicate all this, and you're like on set and like, I mean, the director does prep, but it's very hard as a TV director to absorb all the communication also.
Yeah. When I think, again, it's a testament to why, at least in my opinion, it is essential to have writers produce their own episodes and be there on set. It just makes a world of difference. And especially in a True Blood set where we had some of the best television directors there are, right? Yourself
Fantastic.
included, but at a certain point, there's these setups where, the writer tells the director the note, and then the director interprets to go give the actor the note, and the writer isn't supposed to talk to the actor. There's sometimes these hierarchies that get set up. And because of the sort of family collaborative nature that at least I felt on our sets, there wasn't a problem if we all had a conversation together, that it was acceptable for writer, director, and actor to kind of try to get on the same page together.
Just to have the writer on the set is unique, right? Like a lot of sets writers aren't even there, which is so
Yeah, to have
crazy.
you there as a resource, as an actor, huge.
Yeah, no, that was really essential. And the way I understand the way the TV writing, TV directing, TV production, like why it's set up the way that it's set up. But like the friction's installed deliberately, but sometimes you're like, come on. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, I always feel this too in like whenever I go to direct on a TV show, the actors have like been living these characters.
Yeah.
Do you know, like they know their characters. Like, so, and I remember Deborah, it was so incredible. Like you kept track. I just remember you had this book, like this Jessica book, and it was everything.
I'm an A+ student.
That had happened to you as a character.
Yeah.
Since you showed up.
Since before I showed up.
Since before you showed up, of course. Since before you showed up, since your whole creation of life, right? And your memories and things. And I remember there was this one episode, you were addicted to, you were on a fairy blood trip. Yes, totally. And I loved working with you on that episode. But I remember you were like, we went back and forth on the script a little bit because you were like, in episode 306, do you know what I mean? Like, this doesn't make sense because of something. I was like, you were 100% right. Do you know what I mean? But like, the actors are the keepers of the flame because at some point, no matter how ingrained you are in the show, like I wasn't there in season 3. You know what I mean? Like you can like read or something, but there's an institutional memory of that, but it's even more than that because you're living it.
Yeah. There's a body memory. Yeah.
Or I already played this scene like 3 other times. Do you know what I mean? Like I would have a different reaction on the 3rd time this happened to me, or I would, do you know what I mean? Like, but it was really, I love working that way with actors and directors because I'm just like, that's just more fun because you just get to like, because I feel like teasing out the main thing. In my first episode, I remember it was Sookie, like the teaser, Sookie pukes, like Sookie and Alcide are finally getting together.
Oh,
and
yeah,
Sookie pukes on his shoes.
Boot and Rallies.
That was the teaser. Boot and Rally Alley. And there was a line, it was like Eric and Bill were like back, or Alcide, like everybody was like back in the kitchen.
Yeah.
And I wrote a line where Sookie is like, something like I'm being hunted by something and you guys are fighting over it. Like, and then I wrote it down like too. Must be Thursday.
Yep.
I have it right here. I wrote it down, Angela.
9,000-year-old vampire wants to suck my blood. Must be a Thursday.
She goes, I'm sorry. I just keep thinking that if I make the right choice, all this madness will end and life will go back to normal. But it's not going to end, is it? This is it. It's not going to change. We say goodbye. And the next thing, you guys are back in my house and a 3,000-year-old vampire wants to suck my blood. Must be Thursday. And then she goes, well, come on. What are we waiting for? Let's go hunt Russell. Onwards into the jaws of death. Boot and rally.
Yeah.
And she just like, she
Anna
starts
did that
out
so easy.
laughing. She just nailed it. It's so great.
She nailed it. And that was one of the like, that's your given. Do you know what I mean? You can't be like, and then you have to be like, okay, we need to find new emotional territory, but we also have to like acknowledge what has been.
Yes.
And like, so how do we move forward emotionally? Like, how does Suki move forward emotionally? And that was like such a great, I literally like sat and puzzled over that scene.
Oh,
'Cause
you
I was
did?
like, how the fuck is she supposed to? Oh yeah.
Take this
Do you
on
know what I mean?
again.
Like I sat like being like, how can Suki respond to being in this situation again?
Right.
Like I was just like, at some point, it's always been, oh my God, oh, this is crazy. Oh, I can't do this. Oh, I can't. And I was like, at some point, you just have to be like, fuck it.
Yeah.
You just have to be like, this is my life. And I'm going to like, let's just stop all the mishigash and just get on with it. Do you know what I mean? Like, and this is absurd.
Yeah.
And this whole thing is absurd. And so I'm going to, and I'll be like onwards into the jaws of death.
Yeah.
Okay. Totally like,
It was so perfect. And the dog, she sees them as dogs barking right before that. Remember that? The boys all arguing.
They're all going, roar, roar. Yeah. And she starts laughing. She's amazing.
That's so funny.
Well, so we're coming to the end here. So, but Kristin, before we do your
great.
last question, I did just want to, blow a little more smoke your way, Angela, because I just love your work so much. Which is that, to me, again, every time your episodes come up, and especially watching them again, they're so funny. We're laughing now, and some of that has to do with like leaning into what the show was, which was satire, right? On a very foundational level. And that satire involves not a wink, but an awareness of what this is. And a line like that we just quoted is just the perfect example of that. We are aware that Suki has been in this position before. And so we acknowledge it with some humor and we forge into the darkness, right? Like it's just, there's something about, I think, that quality that you brought to this show that is so delightful and so fresh in this 5th season where, we have to retread a little bit. But I don't know. I just want to say thank you very much for coming on the show and bringing all of that with you. So.
Oh, thank you guys. It was such a dream. Like it was so, and actually it's so fun because I was like, with Alan and the incredible, like that was the greatest. I love every one of the writers who I was on with, and they're all hilarious people, but Alan's he set up a world where you could have both. Do you know what I mean? You could have these depths of emotions and really dark themes, and then this hilarious comedy and wit and satire with it, and it made this heady broth that like you could experience it at all. Do you know and it wasn't and to a testament to you guys and all of the actors on True Blood, I felt like it was the same as like the Double Dutch. Do you know what I mean? Like everybody was just punching above their weight and was able to ride the tone to do the comedy, and then the next scene is despair, and it's and then it's back up again, and it's able to kind of make a delightful but also profound like truth out of what is, do you know what I mean, like a kind of genre conceit, but it was like so fun.
So we have a question that we ask everybody. When you think back on your experience of True Blood, what are 3 words that could come to mind?
3 words that come to mind: insane, fun, true.
That's that's so perfect.
That's pretty on point, I gotta say.
Insane, fun, and true.
True.
Hear, hear.
Angela, it's been such a treat. Thank you so much.
Such a treat. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for having me. It's been so fun.
She's so great. She's so
I
great.
just- It is, I mean, getting that kind of insight into the writer's room. You know, I think because many of the writers we spoke to, we talked about the earlier seasons, but she's talking about what it was like in the mix.
In the thick of it, man.
I mean, oh my God, how it was stressful,
Yeah.
but also exhilarating to hear.
Yeah.
Wow, 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 wow. And that's why these writers are so top notch, because they were in an environment that like required that of them.
Yeah,
Wow.
I know. I really got into the sensation of, as she was telling it, of being in the writer's room and, you know, coming into that show. And I got so nervous sitting here in my house.
Oh, I don't think I could have done
Well,
it.
but then I realized, wait a minute, I felt the same way. Like we were all in our jobs. I think Audrey Fisher felt that way. I think Suzuki felt that way. I think, and she says everyone was hitting, you know, punching above their weight. Everybody was.
It's that weird balance, though, of being asked and expected of, you know, your best and highest quality work, while also feeling very supported.
Yes.
And,
Yes.
you know, it's scary, but you're not scared of someone.
Right.
You know, like it's not because Alan Ball's breathing down your
Exactly.
neck. It's because he is very calmly saying, I know you can do better work than this, or I know you can do
Yes.
great work. Go for it. you
Yes,
know?
fully
It's-
support you.
It's such an
Expect your
incredible-
best. And if you don't
Yeah.
do it, you will be gone.
Yeah.
But we love you.
But we love you. Thanks for playing.
We cherish you as long as you show up with bells on.
Wild.
And if you don't, you'll be gone.
But
and
that's
we
also
love
why
you.
we see characters like, you know, like Steve Newland, Michael McMillan coming back,
Yes.
Sarah Newland, Anna Camp coming back, because they proved
Yeah.
with the small bit they had to do that they were exceptional. And so great. That's what we honor.
Yeah.
You get to have more. It's so
Everyone was
wonderful.
exceptional, and Angela was exceptional.
Yeah. And Angela is no exception to the exceptionality.
Yes. Next week on Truest Blood, it is discussion week. While we love a good interview, we also want to get all our own stories on the air and do it with someone that we adore.
Yes, our dear friend Tara Buck is joining us to discuss season 6.
Oh
It
my
is
God.
impossible not to have the best time in the world hanging out with her, so
Always.
this is going to be a good one. Thanks for listening, Troopies. Subscribe and follow wherever you listen to your podcasts, and we'll see you next week.
Y'all come back now, you hear?
Truest Blood is produced by Safe Haven for HBO. Executive producers are Janina Gavankar, Kristin Bauer, and Deborah Ann Wool. Our producer is Gabrielle Gallon, and our audio producer is Christopher Wool. Our theme song was recorded just for this podcast by Jace Everett. Additional music was composed by Timo Chen. And remember, you can watch all of the original episodes of True Blood on Max.